By day, sunlight poured over the mist-shrouded peaks, illuminating dense forests and cascading waterfalls. By night, however, the mountains transformed into an ominous labyrinth, steeped in shadow and silence. Among the winding trails and forgotten paths was a road so notorious locals barely spoke its name: Black Hollow Road. For as long as anyone could remember, tales of Black Hollow Road had spread like whispers in the wind. Some said it was cursed, others claimed it was haunted by spirits of the past. But all agreed on one thing: never travel this road at night. Sarah and Mark were blissfully unaware of these warnings. On their way back from a weekend getaway in Gatlinburg, the young couple found themselves on a deserted mountain road, their GPS glitching and rerouting with every twist and turn. Mark squinted at the screen. "Looks like this shortcut will save us half an hour," he said, oblivious to the dread creeping into Sarah's chest. "Are you sure?" she asked, eyeing the overgrown trees that formed a canopy overhead, blotting out the moonlight. "It feels wrong." Mark chuckled. "Come on, it's just a road. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst, it turned out, was far beyond their imagination. As they turned onto Black Hollow Road, the temperature seemed to plummet. The air grew dense, pressing against them like an unseen force. The headlights illuminated a narrow path flanked by skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the night sky. The gravel crunched under the tires, echoing in the unnatural stillness. Minutes turned into an eternity as the road stretched on, endlessly winding and weaving. The GPS froze entirely, its screen flashing an error message. "Great," Mark muttered, gripping the wheel tighter. "Maybe we should turn around," Sarah suggested, her voice quivering. "This doesn't feel right." Before Mark could respond, a shadow darted across the road. He slammed on the brakes and the car screeched to a halt. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered. "Probably just a deer," Mark said, though his knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. But deep down, he wasn't so sure. The road grew narrower, the trees pressing closer. The beams of the headlights seemed to weaken, barely piercing the darkness. Then came the sounds, a faint whispering, like voices carried on the wind. At first, it was barely audible, but it grew louder, a cacophony of murmurs that seemed to come from all directions. "Stop the car," Sarah said abruptly. "What? Why?" Mark asked. "Just stop," she insisted. He obeyed, pulling over to the side. Sarah rolled down her window, her eyes scanning the forest. "Do you hear that?" Mark listened. The whispering stopped. Silence enveloped them once more, oppressive and absolute. "I don't hear anything," he said. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She swore she'd seen movement among the trees, figures, pale and indistinct, watching them. "Let's just get out of here," she said, rolling up the window. Mark nodded and pressed the gas, but the car wouldn't budge. The engine sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the heart of the darkness. "You've got to be kidding me," Mark said, twisting the key in the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. "What now?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her voice. Before he could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows ahead. It was a man, or at least something resembling one. He wore tattered clothes and moved with an unnatural gait, his head tilted at an odd angle. In one hand, he held a lantern, its dim light flickering like a dying ember. "Need some help?" the man called, his voice raspy and hollow. Mark hesitated, instinct screaming at him to stay in the car, but Sarah's pleading eyes pushed him to act. "Stay here," he said, stepping out into the chill. The man grinned as Mark approached. His teeth were sharp, unnaturally so, and his eyes glowed faintly in the lantern's light. "This road ain't kind to travelers at night," he said. "Best be on your way." "Our car won't start," Mark explained, glancing nervously back at Sarah. The man's grin widened. "Oh, I can fix that," he said, stepping closer. "For a price." Mark's stomach churned. "What kind of price?" he asked warily. The man leaned in, his voice a sinister whisper. "A memory. Just one. Something precious." Mark recoiled, but before he could respond, Sarah stepped out of the car. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between Mark and the stranger. He says he can fix the car," Mark stammered, "but he wants a memory." Sarah frowned. "That doesn't make any sense." "Nothing about this place makes sense," Mark muttered. The man tilted his head, his grin unwavering. "You'll not leave this road without my help," he said. "Choose wisely." After a tense silence, Mark finally relented. "Fine," he said. "Take one." The man's eyes glinted. He reached out, placing a hand on Mark's forehead. A wave of cold swept over him, and then it was gone. The man stepped back, his lantern flickering brighter. "You may go," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. Mark stumbled back to the car, his head spinning. Sarah helped him into the driver's seat, her concern mounting. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded, though he felt different. Something was missing, though he couldn't quite place it. Shaking off the feeling, he turned the key. This time, the engine roared to life. "Let's get out of here," he said, flooring the gas. The car sped down the road, the sinister whispers fading into the distance. They didn't stop until they reached the safety of a brightly lit gas station. Only then did Sarah notice the change in Mark. He seemed distant, his eyes vacant. "What did he take?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll never forget the feeling of losing it." As they drove away from the Smoky Mountains, the couple vowed never to speak of that night again. But deep down, they knew they were marked by Black Hollow Road. Somewhere in the recesses of Mark's mind, a cherished memory, a fragment of his very soul, was gone forever, leaving behind an emptiness that would haunt him for the rest of his life. And Sarah? She could never shake the feeling that they hadn't truly escaped, that something from Black Hollow Road had followed them, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. For as long as they lived, one rule guided their travels: never travel this road at night.